Chapters 6 through 9 and We Are Connected are really exploring the evolution of the work culture in America, leading to track 9 called Love 2024, where I was really trying to explore what technology like cell phones have done to relationships and what an increased sense of work, sense of obligation to work more has done also to our relationships. Now the question is, how do you depict this with music? I decided to go back in time twice. First, I used almost a jungle style for the main track, the drums, the bass, the sonic effects. And to that, I added an imitative quality of string writing. This is almost a form of counterpoint. Well, it really is, where rather than just writing a melody and the string parts or just a harmony accompaniment, it's lines of music that are telling the story within those lines and how they're being connected. Let's first dive into the sound of what I would call the basic track. We're using some vocal samples created along with my wife, Becky. We have a bass, we have some percussion that's very dialed in, and you're gonna hear as the track goes, it's really limited to just percussion and drums. There's not much more other than some occasional effects. So here's where the beat really starts. Pretty bare, pretty simple, calling back to, I don't know, late 90s, somewhere in there. Then to that, I've added, and I'll play them just on their own so you can hear them, string parts. Just 2 lines, 1 harmonized. You can hear they're almost talking to one another. So in this case, it's not quite imitation, but some kind of contrapuntal lines that are happening. But you put that underneath the other bass track and it sounds like this. Not that I was necessarily thinking this when I was writing this track, but I do feel it captures the sense of energy and motion, always doing something with the bass and the drums, and a kind of lovingness that's happening in the strings, and then the strings give way and become percussive right here. Okay, in the second part of the track, we actually have very similar material in the bass layer of the track itself. It's just been altered a little bit. That sounds like this. Beefier bass, more interesting percussion, like 4 different types of cymbals being used, and 2 snares, a real snare that was just recorded and a sampled snare that I recorded and then also treated. A little bit later in this section, we get the same bass layer track and I slowly add a canon, meaning that the rhythm that starts dun, 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 as soon as that one starts in the percussion and the bass, it then starts in the strings just a bar later. So it's as if I took the one part up in the track and copied it and then just moved it over, and then they move like this. Last section in Ways is my favorite. You get quite a different beat, and I think it's a lot more aggressive. The bass sound is more slappy, more aggressive. The snare sound is way more in your face. And this is trying to tighten up the sound, because in the story what's happening here is essentially the gentleman doing the texting is trying to find a way to buy time to work more, even though he's not working. So there's layers there. He's on his cell phone. He wants to keep scrolling on his cell phone. He's using work as an excuse, which seemed viable because we're all used to working so much. So I wanted to capture that juxtaposition, those contrasts of emotions. What's happening in the string parts over this section I just played. A little loving, some sighing, and maybe you already noticed, they're also separate lines, quasi and canon. A little bit later, you get a third entrance with the same material. Now here's the thing, you have this musical contrast already happening, telling different sides of a similar story. But I'm gonna let it play for a while, and I want you to notice that as it goes closer to the end, the 3 string lines start changing. They become more dissonant, they become more almost weeping or wailing. You're gonna hear a lot more ranges being covered, and what this does collectively, I think, is it increases the tension until it becomes really an almost all-out late 1800s romantic ululation of sorts in the string parts, working over this jungle style beat and bass line. I'm just gonna let it play for a while. And it finally arrives here where it's very stern, clearly in a minor key, even though there are still non-chord tones. This track was a blast to write, and I think it ended up being incredibly effective in telling the story. Don't forget to go to the ATC site. Every time you visit it, you're supporting all of the artists that are working to make this idea, what that is Art Tracks Chronicle, and these tracks to life. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you next time.